this is stage 6. Hey. This is stage 6, Texas, second pass, 5.57 miles. Okay, you're gonna stay there?
Yep.
Okay. And we are armed. Thank you.
Count you down, 30 seconds.
Okay. This is left 4, loose starts, stay left over crest.
Is the camera on?
Yes, right 5 plus 15 seconds. 10. 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Left 4, loose starts. Stay left over crest. Right 5 plus 50. Right 5, 17. Left 6, long, over smoke jump.
Louder.
Left 5, into right 5 minus over smoke crest, opens, over into kick, repeat, opens, into kick, into left 4 plus, into long crest, into right 4 plus, over smoke crest. Left 4 minus over smoke crest, right 4 plus, into crest, into right 5 plus, 30. Left 5 plus, 30, smoke jump, loose ends, 30, left 4 plus, over smoke crest, into right 4 plus, over smoke crest, 70, right 4 minus, narrow, loose, into crest, into left 3 plus, over smoke crest, into right 5 plus, long, 70, kick, jump, 70, caution, left 5 and long, over smoke crest, tightens 4 minus, hug into narrow bridge, repeat, left 5 long, over smoke crest, tightens 4 minus, hug into narrow bridge. Right 5 minus loose, 100. Right 5 minus 50. Left 5 plus, over crest 30. Smoke crest 30. Right 4. Left 4 plus. Right 4 minus. Into left 3 loose. Into right 5 minus opens, over smoke jump 30. Left 6 loose, long, over smoke crest 30. Right 5, 50. Right 5 plus, over smoke crest 70. Left 4 minus, over crest, into right 5, tightens 3 plus. Repeat, left 5. Left 4 minus over crest, into right 5, tightens 3 plus. Into left 3 short, over smoke crest, into right 3 plus, 50. Right 5 plus. Into left 5 minus, tightens 4 minus. Crest. Into right 6, left 4, stay right, over smoke jump, into left 6 plus, over smoke crest, right 5 minus long, over smoke crest, caution, left 3 minus, stay out, repeat, caution, left 3 minus, stay out, crest, loose starts, 50, right 6, left 5 minus, right 4 long, left 5 plus, into right 5, 70, left 6 over crest, into right 5 plus, over jump, 30, stay right over smoke crest, into crest, into left 4, 30, smoke crest, into right 6 long, 70, right 5 plus, over smoke jump, into left 6, over smoke crest, 30, right 4 plus, over crest, long, tightens, over smoke crest, into left 6, no cut, 100, left 5 minus, over smoke jump, opens, tightens, 5, loose, into crest, into right 4 plus long, left 5 minus, over smoke crest, 50, right 6 over crest, loose starts, 30, crest, go, left 6, 50, right 6, 30, stay left over smoke jump, 30, right 5 short, into caution left 4, into crest, into right 3 plus, over crest 30, left 3 plus, right 6, into left 5 plus, over smoke crest, right 5 minus, over smoke crest, tightens 3 plus, loose, smoke crest, into left 4 plus, tightens 3 plus, over crest, 30, right 4, over crest,
Next.
100, smoke crest 30, left 4 plus, over smoke crest, go, right 6, long, over smoke crest, into left 6 plus, into right 6, over smoke crest, long, left 6, over crest, into right 6, flat jump, 180, right 6 plus, loose start, into left 6 plus, over kick. Repeat, right 6 plus, loose starts, into left 6 plus, over kick, 150, right 6 plus, into smoke crest, loose ends, into right 5 plus, very long. Left 4 minus, no cut, tightens, into crest, into right 4 minus, down, stay out, 70, caution left 3 late, repeat, left 3 late, loose, right 6, tightens 5 minus, over smoke crest, long, left 5 plus, over crest, tightens 4 plus, right 6 plus, over smoke crest, 120, left 6, or long crest over finish, 50, right 5 minus, loose, go, 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 there you go, good job.
Good job too. You.
What was that?
Good job for you.
Thank you.